The discovery. The signal appeared on Lieutenant Kira Novik's scanner like a whisper in the void, faint but unmistakably artificial. She recalibrated the long-range sensors of the Galactic Federation patrol vessel Vigilant, convinced she had encountered a glitch. The Moros system had been classified as uninhabitable for centuries, its planets ravaged by intense radiation from an unstable star. "Captain Drell," she called, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm detecting a transmission from the third planet of the Moros system." Captain Drell, a veteran Alturian with slate-gray skin and eyes that had witnessed 4 decades of space exploration, moved to her station with practiced efficiency. The Alturian's expression remained neutral, but the slight twitch of his facial tendrils betrayed his surprise. "Impossible," he stated, studying the signal pattern. Moros III was deemed uninhabitable after the failed colonization attempt in 2287. No one survived. Yet the signal persisted, growing stronger with each passing moment. It wasn't random noise or a dying beacon. It was a structured broadcast, deliberately aimed toward Federation space. "It carries human encryption patterns," Lieutenant Novak added, "but with modifications I've never seen before." Within hours, the Vigilant had altered course toward the Moros system, its quantum engines pushing to maximum safe velocity. Federation protocol was clear. All unexplained signals required investigation, particularly those from prohibited zones. Captain Drell had notified Central Command, which responded with unusual urgency, ordering immediate reconnaissance and minimal engagement. The Moros colonization failure had become legendary, a cautionary tale taught to every spacefaring cadet. 20,000 human settlers had embarked on humanity's most ambitious early expansion effort, only to encounter conditions far worse than initial surveys had indicated. The system's star had entered an unexpected activity cycle, bathing the planets in lethal radiation. The microbiome proved hostile to Earth-based life, and the atmospheric composition had shifted dramatically since the initial surveys. Official records stated that all contact was lost within 14 months, and recovery missions found only empty habitats and graves. As the Vigilant approached the outer reaches of the Moros system, the mystery deepened. Sensor readings showed significant anomalies. Radiation levels that should have been lethal were somehow contained, and atmospheric readings from Moros III indicated artificial modification on a planetary scale. "Captain," called Science Officer Talia Rodriguez, "I'm detecting orbital structures around all major bodies in the system. These aren't derelicts. They're active installations." The main view screen shifted to display a stunning sight. Elegant orbital platforms encircled Moros II, their design unlike anything in the Federation registry. The planet's surface showed patterns of development visible even from orbit, sprawling cities connected by transportation networks that glowed with energy. "They're hailing us," Lieutenant Novak announced, her console illuminating with an incoming transmission. The bridge crew fell silent as the view screen shifted again. A figure appeared, humanoid, but with subtle differences that immediately registered as uncanny. The being had the basic structure of a human, but their skin held a faint metallic sheen, and beneath it, intricate patterns pulsed with bioluminescence. Their eyes, larger than standard human proportions, contained irises that shifted colors like liquid mercury. "Greetings, visitors," the figure spoke, their voice resonant with harmonics that no unmodified human vocal cords could produce. "I am Administrator Ilara Voss of the Moros Collective. You have entered sovereign space." Captain Drell stepped forward, his diplomatic training taking over despite his shock. "This is Captain Drell of the Galactic Federation vessel, Vigilant. We detected your signal and came to investigate. Federation records indicate this system was abandoned after a failed colonization attempt." A smile spread across Administrator Voss's face. "Too perfect, too symmetrical." "Abandoned is an interesting choice of words, Captain. Our ancestors were forgotten, not evacuated. But as you can see, we did not perish. We adapted." The explanation that followed stunned the crew of the Vigilant. The original colonists had indeed suffered terribly, losing more than half their population in the first year. But a small group of geneticists and bioengineers had pursued a desperate solution, modifying human biology to withstand the hostile environment. Using the planet's indigenous microorganisms as a foundation, they had created symbiotic relationships that allowed the colonists to process the radiation and toxic elements that should have killed them. What began as survival became transformation, Voss explained, displaying images of the colony's evolution. Each generation advanced the work of the previous one. We adapted our bodies, then our technology, then our environment itself. The star that once threatened to destroy us now powers our civilization. The visuals showed humans with increasingly dramatic modifications, neural interfaces embedded in skulls, skin that could photosynthesize radiation, respiratory systems that filtered toxic gases. Their technology had evolved along similar paths, blurring the boundaries between biological and mechanical systems. We detected your Federation's expansion, reaching the edges of our sensor network, Voss continued. After considerable debate, we decided it was time to announce our existence. The Federation will be fascinated by your survival, Captain Drell offered cautiously. I'm authorized to establish preliminary diplomatic relations and arrange for an official delegation. Something shifted in Administrator Voss's expression, a hardening, a calculation. We're not seeking admission to your Federation, Captain. We're announcing our sovereignty. The Moros system belongs to its people, all 7 planets, their moons, and the star itself. The implication hung in the vacuum between them. This wasn't a lost colony seeking rescue or reintegration. It was a declaration of independence from a civilization that had evolved in isolation for centuries. Captain Drell maintained his diplomatic stance. Perhaps we should discuss this further. Would you permit a small delegation from my ship to meet with your representatives? The meeting took place aboard one of the orbital platforms, a structure that seemed to pulse with life itself. The walls contained engineered organisms that regulated temperature and atmosphere, while energy flowed through conduits that resembled veins more than wiring. Captain Drell led a small team including Lieutenant Novik and Science Officer Rodriguez, while Administrator Voss was accompanied by 3 others who displayed varying degrees of modification. Your adaptation is remarkable, Rodriguez commented, unable to hide her scientific fascination. But why announce yourselves now? You've clearly survived without Federation assistance for generations. One of the Moros' representatives, who had introduced himself as Director Kai Soren, answered. His modifications were more extensive than Voss's, his skin almost transparent in places, revealing organs that pulsed with an inner light. Necessity, he stated simply. Your expansion has accelerated. Within decades, you would have encroached on our territory regardless. We preferred to choose the timing of this revelation. The Federation doesn't encroach, Captain Drell corrected politely. We explore and establish cooperative relationships with new worlds. After assessment and classification, Voss countered. We've studied your protocols. Worlds deemed valuable are incorporated into your economic sphere. Those considered dangerous or unprofitable are quarantined or exploited for resources. The accusation hung in the air, uncomfortable in its partial truth. Federation expansion had indeed categorized worlds based on their strategic and economic potential. What exactly are you proposing? Captain Drell asked, steering the conversation toward practicalities. Recognition, Voss stated firmly. The Moros Collective as a sovereign entity controlling this entire star system. We're willing to establish trade relations, cultural exchanges, even limited technological sharing, but as equals, not as a rediscovered colony subject to Federation authority. Lieutenant Novak studied the Moros' representatives carefully. Despite their human origins, their thinking had clearly diverged from standard human patterns. Their isolation and adaptation had created something new, neither fully human nor truly alien. The Federation Council will need time to consider such a proposal, Captain Drell responded diplomatically. This situation is unprecedented. Of course, Voss agreed with that too-perfect smile. But perhaps a demonstration would help inform their deliberations. Before anyone could respond, every electronic device carried by the Federation delegation emitted a soft chime and deactivated simultaneously. In orbit, the Vigilant reported a momentary power fluctuation affecting all systems. A small example of our capabilities, Director Soren explained calmly. Your technology relies on principles we transcended generations ago. We've developed methods to manipulate energy fields at a fundamental level. The implied threat was clear, delivered with perfect civility. The Moros Collective wasn't merely requesting sovereignty. They were demonstrating the power to enforce it. As the Federation delegation prepared to depart, Administrator Voss offered a final observation. Your records state that the Moros colonization failed because humans couldn't adapt to this environment. The truth is that we adapted beyond what you would recognize as human. We became what we needed to be to survive. Remember that when your council deliberates our status. Within days, a Federation diplomatic cruiser arrived in the Moros system, accompanied by 3 heavily armed vessels, a show of force thinly disguised as standard escort procedure. The arrival of Ambassador Ileana Cortez, the Federation's senior diplomat for first contact scenarios, underscored the gravity with which Central Command viewed the situation. They've transformed an entire star system, Science Officer Rodriguez reported during the initial briefing. Their technological capabilities exceed our own in several key areas, particularly in biotechnology, energy manipulation, and environmental engineering. They've actually stabilized their star's radiation output through a network of energy collectors that harvest and redistribute plasma flows. Ambassador Cortez, a woman whose steel-gray hair and penetrating gaze had faced down the most formidable alien negotiators in the galaxy, nodded thoughtfully. And their defenses. Captain Drell hesitated. Unknown, Ambassador. They've allowed us to scan their habitats and vessels, but certain areas remain opaque to our sensors. They appear to have energy manipulation capabilities we don't fully understand. The Federation Council is deeply concerned, Cortez stated. An independent human faction controlling an entire star system creates a dangerous precedent. Other colonies might get similar ideas. What no one said aloud was the implicit threat to the established order. The Federation had spent centuries carefully balancing the interests of dozens of species across hundreds of worlds. A new power emerging suddenly from nowhere, especially one with potentially superior technology, threatened that delicate equilibrium. As negotiations began in earnest, the first cracks in the Federation's unified approach appeared. Some council members saw opportunity in the Moros Collective, a chance to access new technologies and resources through peaceful cooperation. Others perceived only threat and advocated for containment or forced reintegration. Meanwhile, in the depths of the Moros system, the descendants of the Forgotten prepared for all possibilities. They had survived extinction once before. They would not be forgotten again. The confrontation. Admiral Helena Zhao stood on the bridge of the Federation flagship Intrepid, surveying the tactical display with practiced calm. The Moros system glowed in the holographic projection, annotated with the positions of 30 Federation vessels, the largest fleet deployment in a decade. 2 weeks of diplomatic negotiations had reached an impasse, and Central Command had decided a more persuasive approach was needed. All vessels report ready, Admiral, announced her executive officer, Commander Tavik, a Rigelian whose crystalline exoskeleton glittered under the bridge lights. Acknowledged, Zhao responded, her voice betraying none of the unease she felt. In her 40 years of service, she had commanded actions against pirates, rebels, and hostile alien species, but never against human colonists, modified or otherwise. Ambassador Cortez stood nearby, her diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the military personnel surrounding her. This display of force is premature, Admiral. The Moros representatives were still considering our latest proposal. The Council disagrees, Zhao replied evenly. Intelligence suggests they're stalling while reinforcing their defenses. We're simply ensuring they understand the seriousness of the Federation's position. The latest proposal had been little more than an ultimatum: accept Federation oversight and limited autonomy or face isolation through a system-wide quarantine enforced by the fleet. The Moros Collective had received it with that same unsettling calm that had characterized all their interactions. "Admiral," called the sensor officer, "we're detecting unusual energy readings throughout the system. All Moros installations are showing power spikes." Before Zhao could respond, Administrator Voss's image appeared on the main view screen, projected simultaneously to every Federation vessel. The Moros' leader's appearance had changed subtly since the first contact. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin pulsed more intensely, and her eyes had shifted to a deep violet hue. "Admiral Zhao," she greeted with perfect composure, "your fleet's arrival forces us to accelerate our timetable. We had hoped for a more measured introduction to galactic politics." Zhao stepped forward, maintaining the stern demeanor expected of a Federation flag officer. "The Federation Council has authorized me to establish a quarantine of this system pending resolution of your status. No vessels will be permitted to enter or leave without explicit authorization." Voss tilted her head slightly, the gesture uncomfortably reminiscent of an avian predator studying prey. "That would be problematic, Admiral, as we have already dispatched envoys to 17 independent worlds across 3 sectors. Technological demonstrations have been arranged. Trade negotiations have begun." The revelation staggered the bridge crew. Somehow, the Moros Collective had already bypassed the Federation's carefully constructed diplomatic barriers, reaching out directly to worlds that might be receptive to alternative alliances. "That's a violation of Federation communication protocols." Ambassador Cortez interjected, her diplomatic training failing to mask her alarm. "We are not Federation members," Voss reminded her with that perfect, unnatural smile. "And many worlds chafe under your protocols. They welcome alternatives." Admiral Zhao's tactical mind immediately grasped the implications. If the Moros Collective established direct relationships with independent worlds or Federation members seeking greater autonomy, the carefully maintained balance of power would collapse. Already, species like the Velderan Concordat and the Ta Collective had expressed dissatisfaction with certain Federation policies. "We can stop your vessels," Zhao stated with more confidence than she felt. "Can you?" Voss asked simply. "Our technology allows us to manipulate the fundamental forces your ships depend upon. But perhaps a demonstration would be more convincing than claims." Without warning, every system on the Intrepid flickered simultaneously. Gravity wavered, communications cut out, and even life support hesitated before emergency systems engage. Across the fleet, similar disruptions occurred with precise coordination. "That was a carefully calibrated pulse," Voss explained as the system stabilized. "We could have disabled your vessels entirely, but we prefer dialogue to confrontation." Admiral Zhao maintained her composure with effort. In all her years of service, she had never encountered a force capable of affecting an entire fleet simultaneously without firing a single conventional weapon. "What precisely do you want?" she asked directly, military pragmatism overriding diplomatic niceties. "Recognition of our sovereignty," Voss answered immediately. "Non-interference in our continued development, and a seat at the galactic table, not as a Federation member, but as an independent power with whom you must negotiate." The demand was unprecedented. Since its founding, the Federation had operated on the principle that humanity spoke with one voice in galactic affairs. Colonies, regardless of their distance or development, remained under Earth's ultimate authority. The Moros Collective wasn't just challenging their specific status, they were undermining a fundamental principle of Federation structure. As Admiral Zhao prepared to respond, another communication channel activated. The stern visage of Councillor Dravik, the Arcturian representative and current head of the Federation Security Council, appeared on a secondary screen. "Admiral Zhao," the alien's modulated voice rasped, "the Council has received troubling reports. 17 worlds, you say?" The question was directed at Administrator Voss, who inclined her head in confirmation. "Including Arcturus Prime," she added casually. The revelation sent a shock through the bridge. Arcturus Prime was the Arcturian homeworld, a founding member of the Federation, and one of its most influential voices. If the Moros had established direct contact there, bypassing Federation protocols, the political implications were staggering. "What have you offered our worlds?" Councillor Dravik demanded, his compound eyes narrowing. "Energy independence," Voss replied simply. "Our star stabilization technology can be adapted to any system, eliminating power scarcity. Medical advances that allow adaptation to hostile environments without terraforming. Transportation methods that don't require your controlled hyperspace lanes." Each offering struck at a crucial point of dependency that kept Federation worlds aligned with central policy. Energy distribution, medical technology, and transportation routes were the three pillars of Federation economic control. A tense silence fell over the communication channels. In that moment, the balance of power shifted perceptibly. Ambassador Cortez stepped forward, her diplomatic instincts recognizing the critical juncture. "Perhaps we should reconvene the negotiation team with expanded parameters. The situation clearly warrants a more flexible approach." Admiral Zhao recognized the tactical retreat in the diplomat's words. The show of force had failed before it began, not through direct confrontation, but through strategic outmaneuvering on a galactic scale. "The Council will require certain assurances," Councillor Dravik stated, his tone making it clear that the decision had already been reached in hurried background communications. "Of course," Administrator Voss agreed. "We have prepared a comprehensive proposal for coexistence. We have no interest in destabilizing the Federation, merely in establishing our rightful place as equals." As the immediate crisis de-escalated, Lieutenant Novak, who had been monitoring communications from the Vigilant, made a crucial observation to Captain Drell. "Sir," she said quietly, "I've been analyzing their transmission patterns. The Moros aren't just communicating with those 17 worlds. They're receiving responses, regular, encrypted data streams. Whatever they've been offering, some worlds have already accepted." Captain Drell nodded grimly. They'd been planning this for years, positioning themselves carefully before making first contact. "We didn't discover them. They revealed themselves precisely when they were ready." The negotiations that followed spanned weeks, expanding to include representatives from dozens of Federation worlds. The Moros Collective presented their case with meticulous precision, revealing only carefully selected aspects of their technology and biology, enough to demonstrate their advancement without exposing their vulnerabilities. What became increasingly clear was the philosophical gulf that had developed during their centuries of isolation. The Moros viewed themselves not as a lost human colony, but as a new species entirely, post-human in the truest sense. Their biology, society, and technology had evolved together in ways that had no parallel in known space. "We are what humanity might have become without the constraints of Federation uniformity," Director Soren explained during one session. "Each adaptation, each modification was driven by necessity and guided by choice. We transformed ourselves to survive, then to thrive." The Federation Council ultimately had little choice but to recognize the Moros Collective as a sovereign entity, the first human-originated power to exist outside Federation authority. The precedent sent shockwaves through the established order, encouraging other colonies to reconsider their positions and allegiances. 6 months after first contact, a formal recognition ceremony took place on Moros II itself. Federation representatives, including Admiral Zhao and Ambassador Cortez, set foot on a world that defied everything they had believed about human limitations. The planet that historical records had deemed uninhabitable now supported sprawling cities integrated seamlessly with the environment. Buildings grew rather than being constructed, composed of engineered organisms that responded to their inhabitants' needs. Transportation occurred through controlled warping of spacetime rather than physical vehicles. Energy flowed visibly through the environment, harvested directly from the star that had once threatened to destroy all life. During a private moment in the recognition ceremony, Administrator Voss approached Admiral Zhao with an observation. Your historical records state that the Moros' colonization failed because humanity wasn't ready to face such a hostile environment, she said. The truth is that your Federation wasn't ready for what we would become by surviving it. Admiral Zhao studied the administrator. This being who was simultaneously human in origin yet fundamentally alien in development. And now, what does humanity become with your influence spreading through our worlds? Voss's smile held genuine warmth for perhaps the first time. Adaptable, resilient, unbounded. The very qualities that allowed us to survive when we were abandoned will now transform the galaxy itself. Isn't that what your species has always done, Admiral? Adapt and overcome. As the ceremony concluded and the Federation delegation prepared to depart, Captain Drell and Lieutenant Novak stood on an observation platform overlooking one of the Moros' cities. The structures pulsed with internal light as day shifted to night, the entire settlement seeming to breathe as one organism. Do you think we made the right choice? Novak asked quietly. Recognizing their independence sets a precedent that could fracture the Federation. Captain Drell considered the question carefully, his Alturian sense of history providing perspective. The Federation has faced evolutionary pressure, Lieutenant. Like the Moros themselves, we must adapt or risk becoming obsolete. Perhaps this is the adaptation we needed. As their shuttle departed the Moros system, the descendants of the Forgotten watched from their transformed world. A civilization born from abandonment that had risen to reshape the galaxy's future. They had not merely survived against impossible odds, they had transcended them entirely, becoming something that would forever change humanity's place among the stars. The isolation that should have destroyed them had instead forged them into something greater, a testament to the limitless potential that emerges when necessity meets determination. The galaxy would never forget the lesson of the Moros Collective. Never underestimate humanity's capacity to transform itself in the face of extinction.